apologies this week. Good morning, thank you all for coming. Lots of new faces, which is unusual after Startup Weekend in particular, which is great to see. Excellent presenter this morning who's going to get us pumped and excited about the future, which is great because the NBN is coming, and as is the SKA project, which Jim's going to talk to us all about. This is really exciting because we're going to be getting awesome speeds straight to our house, and companies and local businesses and everywhere else. It's going to provide some awesome things rather than all the political doomsayers that are going to, you know, I'll let you talk about it. It's better. So we're all happy, and you guys should all be happy as well. You know, no doubt you'll be even happier after, in a few hours' time, whether it's the coffee or Jim's presentations yet to be seen. So we need to go shopping. We need to get our heads working as to how we're going to use it and what we're going to do with it, because there's some really, really good opportunities once you start thinking about what you're going to do with the speed. So the rock star of this morning is none other than Jim Wyatt from the WA Department of Commerce, and he's going to explain about it. But his job is to have a view over all this fantastic new space. He's scrambling up the government and trying to tell us all about why it's such a good thing that we've got this NBN network in place. So without further ado, Jim Wyatt.
Okay, Isaak said to me it's big data work. So make the presentation in context. SKA, NBN. But I want to broaden that. I want to really take you a little bit further afield. You tell me where I am. That's fine. Okay. I'm recording this, so anything I say will be forever in celluloid, digital celluloid, and I won't be able to retract it. Now, I want to start off by putting into context something that we hold very dear when we're working throughout the state and when I also work at a national level. And that is that this is a time of transformation. It is a time of old paradigms being cast away and new paradigms coming into play. And one of the inherent things that we look at is that if you're on board and you're a part of it, then it's going to happen for you, and you are going to make it happen for others. But we are not in a position in WA, and we're not even in a position in Australia to in actual fact say that we really are all on board. Okay? April 6, 2009, at the time, Prime Minister Rudd stood on the steps of Parliament House and announced NBN. Here we are in 2013. We're about to go to another federal election, and we're still arguing whether or not NBN is a good thing or a bad thing. Now, maybe it's just those people that are arguing about it, and all the rest of us have said, you know, just get on with the bloody thing and let's make some value out of it. But that's the sort of context that we aim, you know, to work in this space. Forget about the politics. It's really about the point that when you start adapting, you start manipulating, you start exploring the way that this technology can actually transform people's lives. That's where the wealth creation, the value creation comes into place. And that's what I want to try and take you on a little journey this morning about. When I hear the term big data, my immediate reaction is Gartner's definition of big data, you know, and it's sort of like this, all this about this analytics and that sort of area. But the space that I work in, something like SKA, that's got nothing to do with analytics. Well, it has to a certain degree, but you're analysing things like just what happened from the moment of the Big Bang through something like about 10 billion years of transformation and building and construction of universes. And that's a little bit more than just some information that you might be scraping off a carrier's network around smartphone activity and smartphone utilisation. So this concept of big data, and I want to leave you with a fundamental premise this morning, that whilst we're talking about big data, I would argue that in actual fact we need to be concentrating more on what I call big knowledge. That is, what do you do with the data and how do you make it relevant, of value? And that's where you all come in, because it's how you transform the raw data, whether it be from smartphones or whether it be from outer space, into something that actually adds value and creates value in people's lives. And that's where we want to sort of go on a bit of a journey today. So what is our big data? Where do we work? So in government, to a certain degree, we have a whole range of big data areas. We look at, for instance, Western Australia has got an actual strength. It's actual recognised nationally as having a strength in geospatial. And that starts at things like land management. But it goes all the way over to things we're now talking about in areas like marketing and retail proximity marketing and those sorts of things. So we've got this whole area that's starting to happen. One of the things we aren't doing all that well is actually helping people to understand how they're moving around the physical space. You know, congestion is an issue, whether it be on transport, whether it be on roads, and we're not actually doing anything. I don't know how many of you actually think the Irishmen are actually controlling the Department of Transport, but it seems very odd that the systems that we actually move through don't seem to be very intelligent. They seem to be rather dumb. So there's a whole area that can open up there around grabbing the information and then actually turning it into knowledge so people can make decisions and create value from it. Demographics, so we've got this ageing population, there's a whole range of things. If you actually have a look at a number of the issues that we've been confronting lately, many of it stems back to whether or not we made good planning decisions. So once again, we've got to evaluate whether or not we can actually be using that data and turning it into knowledge, because it's knowledge that you make decisions on, not necessarily data. Environmental, we've got a whole range of challenges ahead of us around our actual resources, resource management, around our environmental management. And really what I want to say is it's not just simply around the management aspect, but it's about protecting it. It's about, again, getting the knowledge so that you can make the right decisions. Obviously in the economic, it's really around the sort of, at the moment we're seeing a lot of stuff in the marketing, in the sort of promotion and presentation, but it's also around the evidence and the business case development, actually creating the reasons for why we should get investment, attract investment and do things in investment. And obviously in my part of my area, we have all these really big arrays and really big sensor networks that are coming into the fore. There's a really good story about down in Tasmania, which we're hoping to actually connect the two states together, because we've got lots of high performance computing and they're developing lots of really cool sensor networks. And they're using sensor networks, for instance, to look at the runoff from pastures into their water systems where they're actually growing oysters, so that they can tell when they have a large weather event when to shut down farming of oysters and harvesting of oysters, so you don't get oysters that are contaminated. And rather than having the old paradigm, which is somebody in the Department of Fisheries says, oh, when you have a weather event you must not harvest for 3 weeks, they actually now use sensors to tell whether or not the water clarity has actually reached a reasonable point within a week and a half, so they can start harvesting again. So that's where it comes back into this economic sort of paradigm. Getting the information at the right time to make the decisions in the most appropriate manner, rather than just using the old paradigm, which was in a guidebook. Somebody said if that happens you've got to wait for a period of time and then pick up again. And there's lots of data. Heaps of data. You know, we often say that effectively what happens is everything you do, I'm creating data right now, so I'm going to assume you're all reasonably NBN savvy. So I'm not going to give you or put you through the unfortunate circumstance of NBN 101. I'm going to hope that you're on board to a reasonable extent. What I want to take you through this morning is the stuff you won't get out of an NBN code press release, or what you won't actually read, generally speaking, through the commentary of some of the less than average journalists that cover this topic. I want to take you through some of the paradigms that NBN proposes. I want to take you through what's sitting behind this in that regards. So the first thing that I want to take you through is, today in our telecommunications network, we use the construct of the network in telephone exchange areas. And we have about 5,000 of them across the country, and each of those telephone exchange areas has a telephone exchange, and largely that's the interconnect point between the endpoints and the rest of the network. What NBN does is it collapses those 5,000 telephone exchange areas into 122. So, ta-da, ta-da, first shocking revelation for you, Twitter moment, the National Broadband Network is not a national broadband network. In actual fact, it's 122 separate networks, because the National Broadband Network Company only connects from a premise back to a point of interconnect. So in this case, I've given you 3 of our regional ones, one in Katanning, one in Geraldton, one in Pinjarra. That one in Geraldton All the properties that are going to be on the NBN from Geraldton to Derby connect back to Geraldton. So all the telephone exchanges between Geraldton and Derby become redundant, other than the fact that they're going to be used in the architecture of the network, because the only point you as a retail service provider can actually plug into to get out to all the endpoints between there and Derby is Geraldton. So Geraldton suddenly becomes a strategically valuable place if you want to actually service anybody in Paraburdoo, Tom Price, Newman, Onslow, Exmouth, Port Hedland, Karratha, Derby, Broome, all those places. You don't have to go anymore to those areas. And when I say go, you don't have to go by getting trunking to those areas. You can actually plug straight into Geraldton, and NBN Co does the rest and pops you out at any premise, whether it be a commercial premise or a residential premise throughout the rest of that area. That's a massive change to what we have today. It's also a massive opportunity because you don't have to go very far to get to 64,000 premises, as opposed to what you used to have to do before, which is you used to have to buy links to all the different telephone exchange areas and aggregate them all back to your point of interconnect. The same in Katanning. Katanning goes from Katanning up to York, out to Kalgoorlie, all the way down to Esperance, all the way back to Margaret River, and all the way back to Katanning. So we call these superpoids, and we have some of the biggest superpoids of anywhere in the nation, the collection points, and the opportunity they represent. So here's my sort of pitch about the concept of big data, because in this construct, big data now is about many communities connecting back to one point. So it's about data from the point of view of what's going on in all those communities. How do you want to actually manage it, monitor it, assess it? You only have to go to Geraldton to do that. And you've now got a dirty great big sensor network or array network that connects you to a whole range of communities. So it's a great opportunity. And how does that look? Okay, so here's Peel. The point of interconnect is at Pinjarra, and just in the Peel region alone, you're going to have, this is not what we call a super POI, this is just an average POI. You're going to collect all those sorts of different communities with some of their different sort of industries and their different sort of challenges and needs. So there's a real opportunity there to start to build commercial, technically driven constructs around service delivery from a single point to a group of multiple points. And also about how do you collect data from all those different points and bring it back and start to create knowledge around that region. I put this one in just in case people don't know that there are 3 different ways of getting connected to the NBN at an endpoint, but essentially they all come back to the one point of entry. You can have voice at one end of the channel on that circuit, and you can have broadband, as we call it, on the other end of the channel. But you can really only have, at maximum, a relationship with one person on voice and a relationship with one person on broadband. This is where I get the big buttons, and this is where I want to actually handle the big buttons out to you. Because the problem in this country is we've done such a good job, okay? One, we've convinced everybody the National Broadband Network's a National Broadband Network. Remember, it's a collection of 122 separate networks. The other thing is that we've convinced everybody that broadband is a synonymous term for internet. They're almost interchangeable. This broadband, it's nothing to do with that. This broadband is actually about creating networks, about creating platforms upon which you can connect to properties. It's not about the fixed paradigm that is when you buy a broadband connection from an internet service provider, all you get to is the internet. Here you can get to 100 different things because it's what you build on this that is actually what you create. So rather than having just one broadband connection going in, you've now got 4 independent Ethernet entry points into every property. That means you can have 4 different relationships with a physical network operator. But each one of those entry points can be tunnelled, so you can have multiple relationships with people on those particular networks. So you could have 4 distinct networks, but you could have upwards of dozens, if not tens of relationships on each network as they tunnel in through that particular technology. So what it actually means now is, and this might sound a bit shocking because we were heading towards this whole concept of aggregated, one-stop shop, single person providing all the services. to a point now where you can just buy your service from whoever you want, and they will be able to get a network pathway into your property. This is more like what reality is. So for a number of years we've been selling this construct that you have to actually have the triple play, or you actually have to have this sort of aggregated model, one-stop shop is really good. You go and talk to consumers, their viewpoint is completely opposite. Their viewpoint is, I want to buy what's relevant to me, when it's relevant to me and how it's relevant to me. I don't want to actually have to go and buy my IPTV entertainment and my voice and my internet and anything else all from one person just because somebody's telling me that that's an efficient and easy way to do it. That's not the way I work today. He goes to his wallet and he opens his wallet up and he shows you all the plastic in it. They're all different relationships with different people. Now, the guy could have a one-stop shop. The bank could be the one-stop shop. But what makes sense in my life is to have some relationship with somebody for a different purpose. As a result, I end up with a big fat wallet, and I'm sure most of yours are the same. But this is the construct that we have to overcome. This notion that this network is actually being built to serve in the same manner that people consume already today. So you can go and buy a circuit, and you can offer a distinct and discrete service into that home, and it's easy peasy. And you don't have to add all the other things. That was this model because it was only one pathway in. So everybody said, oh, it all had to come across the same pathway. But now what we've got is the ability to serve a single consumer with dozens and dozens of people using separate pathways per second. I mean, I'm probably preaching to the converted here. But the reality is that a simple construct like this will already get you to 121 megabits per second down and somewhere between 30 and 50 megabits per second back. And this is not unrealistic. We did some surveying not too long ago and we found out that in the average home these days, how many televisions do you think the average home's got? Who's got three? Three. Yeah, that's where it's at. Now, if you want to run a high definition TV channel into each of those TVs, watching a different channel, a different show, you need a minimum of 30 to 35 megabits per second just to cover that. So you've already got a third of the actual capability before you've even started adding the internet or any of the other sorts of management and control arrangements that you might want to have in the home. So, you know, all this argument about will we ever need this is just ridiculous. It's no wonder that people sitting out there on satellite and wireless are annoyed. They're part of what we call the early release of NBN. And these three councils are all sitting off the same point of interconnect, which is located just off Kenning Highway in Applecross. And it's now created a situation where they are looking at what they want to serve their constituents with, and the fact is that they don't need each of them to have to buy separate systems, because they can actually now get together and buy one system and share it. And some of the stuff they're actually looking at, very exciting stuff. These guys are looking at running their own TV channels directly into people's homes, ratepayers' homes, to be able to create a shift in how they deliver their information. Get away from four-colour brochures, get away from even some of the stuff across the counter, and move into this whole new environment of infotainment-style council, where they deliver information, instructional information on how you go about doing a development application, instructional information on actually how to put the bin at the right part of the curb so that it actually gets picked up efficiently and the truck doesn't knock it over and things like that. But this is all starting to appear, and surprisingly enough, we were with some people from CSIRO and Victoria Park on Monday, and the CEO from Victoria Park said, if I was a living body, I reckon I wouldn't know if I was dead or alive, he said. He got this revelation that he doesn't know what's going on, really, in his town. He knows sort of, but what he's missing is he's missing the ability to pick that data up that's occurring in all different shapes and sizes around his town and to turn it into knowledge that would in turn allow him to respond back in the service delivery to his town. He's now saying we need to be looking at can we scrape any mention of Vic Park from any sort of social networking site? Can we pull that information in and can we start to then analyse that, manipulate it and use it to actually give us decision-making magic to that to actually, you know, exploit that particular construct. I want to stop there because does everybody understand that? Okay? I implore you to think beyond the concept of an internet service provider. Okay? This is the problem we've got. You know, that's why I think one of the worst things we've ever done, broadband equals internet. Everybody is just stuck with that model. Okay? Because all the things you can be doing don't have to be pulled out of the public cloud back to a person. Okay? I know a lot of you work in that space, but the new world says you don't always have to work in that space. You can have a direct relationship with consumers across this network and build direct delivery capabilities. Such as this. So it's what we call considering pulled versus push. So today, I go and get a broadband connection, I connect myself to the internet, I pull everything to myself. I go out there seeking and ferreting around and I see some sort of application and I pull it back to me. But in the world of NBN, you're going to see retail service providers acting more like something like Foxtel. In this case, it's a doctor saying, I want to proactively manage your health. So I'm going to push services into your home that you have to interact with to give me data so that I can actually respond to you. Okay? And you're going to see a lot more of this type of service model coming to the fore as various professionals and various service elements of our economy work that out. I've seen this probably explained in about 5 different manners. Our proposition to you, having spent nearly 20 years working on pilots and trials in government of all shapes and sizes, mainly in health and education, I can tell you that the ones that work are the ones that actually understand the balance between those 4 components. The ones that don't work are the ones where somebody has a device and says, this is a fantastic device, we need to get this out to everybody, and they're going to use it. And if they buy a bunch of devices and they give them to people, and then they say, oh, they don't seem to be using it. Well, they're not connected. There's no interrelationship. They haven't thought of the network. They also haven't thought of what the applications are on it, all the sort of content. Okay? I hear a lot about bring your own device. We have a lot of conversations about bring your own device with people in government, and I talk to a number of businesses about bring your own device. Do you know what's missing from bring your own device? It's another one of those Gartner sort of constructs, forest constructs. You're forgetting bring your own app and bring your own network. You know, there's an assumption that if somebody brings their device to work, that, oh, we're all going to have Wi-Fi within our buildings and they'll be able to map onto our Wi-Fi network and that's how they'll get connection. And that we'll somehow give them iTunes cards to actually go and buy applications that are relevant to us, and that they'll put those on their device and they'll work with it. How many CIOs I talk to go, oh, we've got to do that as well. I thought when you bring your own device, you bring everything else with it. Well, hang on, you know, I'm not spending my money on my broadband connection for your purpose. And you end up with all this sort of confusion that goes on around bring your own device. So it's a big buzzword, but it's missing a couple of other components, and we're starting to see that now. So, whilst this is not necessarily, incredibly relevant to big data, the concept of big data is that you cannot actually turn it into knowledge unless, of course, you get the ecosystem right. Because what happens is things fight against one another. So, the most common thing that we talk to communities, the most common thing we talk to industry sectors about, you don't know what you don't know. The most fundamental thing that you face when you go and talk to any client, they don't know what they don't know. And this is the big issue that we have. This is the reason why we're still arguing about the NBN 4.5, nearly 5 years later. We don't know what we don't know. There's just not enough capability to get out there and actually communicate with the general public, communicate with industry, and get them across the line on what we're talking about. Because this is a paradigm shift. It's a transformational shift. This is not a little bit of an incremental extra that we're looking at. Things like NBN, game changer. Okay? Things like big data and what we're looking at with big apparatus like the SKA, game changers. The SKA is most relevant to us here in WA because whilst we've decided part of it is going to be built here in WA, the next 3 years we're going to spend the time, and when I say we, I'm talking about the international community around it, to actually develop how it can be built. We can't build it today because the technology that is required to operate it doesn't exist. Okay? We're working on around about 300, 400 gigabit per second switches. We need to be talking tens, if not hundreds, of shift in that sort of switch. We need to be up the other end, okay? And that's a quantum shift that any other commercial network environment globally won't move us to, because we've gone from 100 gigabit per second to 400 gigabit per second in about 3 to 4 years. So we are not moving at the pace that we need to be moving for. Probably preaching to the converted, but I just like putting this slide in because it sort of is one aspect of when we sit down and talk to the uninitiated, just how much we have to move them. So when we actually think about, and there's so many stats around social networking and social networking platforms that you can sort of throw up. But I live in the world of economics. So I'm more interested in how it's going to change the value propositions, how it's going to create whole new wealth models. And this is your bread and butter. This is where the future is. The trouble is that we don't have enough, I suppose, engagement and conversation around this, that we are putting and investing time, effort and money into this sort of area. Okay, it's sort of being done in almost an organic fashion, rather than actually getting a good set of a good wave, a good momentum behind it. But that's, I can assure you, we spend a lot of time now working and talking to people and talking to councils, for instance, about their need to be getting their head around this. And there's a really good infographic now that we share with councils that was produced by a Sydney company that actually gets them to understand something like about 35 different touch points and 35 different relationships they can have across their organisation with social networking in that respect. And it again reinforces this whole concept of big data, because just the explosion in social networking and the explosion in a different paradigm of communication and interrelationship is creating so much opportunity for us to mine that information and turn that data into knowledge for people. And of course, I suppose the biggest sort of big data thing that we concentrate on is just the explosion of digital platforms and digital opportunities and digital activity that's going on. And every one of these, because it's in the digital world, creates data and creates recordable, saved, stored data, which in turn gives us this great opportunity to be able to now start going back to this data and much of it that we've created over the last 12 to 18 months, for instance, and start to find new value propositions, wealth propositions on how we can use it. So I want to round up now by talking about where we see, from where I sit within government driving the digital economy agenda, to share with you where I see opportunities that can actually manifest for you. So we're looking at this connectivity component. So we're thinking back to the digital ecosystem. One thing that Western Australia did that no other state has done, the Regional Mobile Communications Project. We went into partnership with Telstra. We've added 22% additional coverage outside of the metropolitan area. We're the only state in Australia now that you can say you can drive from, on Highway 1, from Eucla to Kununurra with an in-car mounted phone and have continuous coverage. And that's the biggest state in Australia has achieved that. Now what does that mean for a whole range of digital opportunities and digital applications that can be related now to, if you hook up GPS with the fact that you've got continuous 3G coverage on that road all the way from one border to the next, all the opportunities you can start to think of, which in the past could only be done if you came into coverage range in a town and then moved out to another area. We've got high performance computing. I'll send Isaak, you can circulate it around. There's an event coming up. When, Cameron? 12th of April. They're out at IVEC is hosting I suppose, an exploration of what can we do when we've got high performance computing, some really nifty sort of researchers, and a whole bunch of interesting challenges from industry and from community, and how can we actually do something with that. We're looking to actually connect our high performance computing to Tasmania's sensor networks to actually explore this whole notion of turning big data into big knowledge. Visualisation and simulation. This is the concept of human interface. It's the concept of how do you take ones and zeros and actually turn it into something that makes sense to somebody. And it's about that notion of using the platforms and using the technology that we have to create a visual and a simulation arrangement. We're now seeing some fantastic companies emerging here in WA that are able to do simple things like, as part of bankability and feasibility assessments on large industrial mine projects, to actually demonstrate in 25 or 40 seconds the 25-year extraction life of a mine, so that a banker can look and say, oh, and get all sexy and excited about exactly what's going to happen over that period. And get their checkbook out. I mean, it's amazing, you know, it's these small things sometimes are what actually drives big, mega buck deals. And it's around that sort of engagement. It's all about engaging, as we know, in the understanding and the knowledge of what's going on. Cyber security is emerging. I'm about to duck off after our presentation. I've got a teleconference call with the United States and with the state of Maryland. They are leading the United States in the cyber security sort of push, and we're about to do a partnership between Western Australia and Maryland, where we'll start opening up exchange opportunities for our companies and for our knowledge and for our information, so that we can become the cyber security hub for Australia. And of course, data storage. And there's not a month that doesn't go by where I don't get a phone call about somebody else building another data centre. I can't believe it. I mean, once upon a time you'd have to beg somebody to actually build a data centre, and now they're coming out of the woodwork. So the infrastructure, the capability is coming to the fore. All we need now is people like yourself with the imagination, the entrepreneurial spirit, to seize and realise the value that's there in the infrastructure and the opportunities, and to create the value and create your wealth through that. And so, what are the things that you know? And I just, you know, this was the last slide, and Isaak was saying to me, "I can get the presentation to me," and I'm saying, "I'm 2 minutes away. I'm 2 minutes away." This was the slide I was on. What I want to leave you with, just from a government point of view, what do we think are the opportunities? Where can big data transform into big knowledge, and as such transform into opportunities? And obviously, having just all of us gone through the excruciating agony of the state election and election campaign, traffic and transport was very much to the fore. But we've got a bigger one. We've just simply got a population, we've got a growing pains problem. And we need this sort of approach to be able to manage that growing pains problem. You only have to look back, and we've got this great opportunity to look back at somewhere like Queensland and southeast Queensland, and 15 years ago and what they went through. And we don't have to repeat that. We shouldn't repeat that. What we should be doing now is using smart and intelligent approaches to overcome and to avoid the same mistakes that they made. Energy and resource management. And we've got some real challenges around energy and resource management because we're a big state. But we've also got this situation where very much what's going on at the moment is that it's all predicated on the utilities, on the person who runs the network, and the intelligence being there for their purpose. When in actual fact, I got my power bill last night, $698. The same period last year, it was only $425. But see, I don't know if you can remember, but summer last year wasn't as hot as this year. This year seemed to be a lot hotter, a lot drier. And that's translating in my hip pocket now to nearly $200 more in my power bill. And I'm sure I've been completely sloppy through that whole period in how I've managed my actual consumption of energy. And with good tools, I reckon I could become a lot better. So really, what I'm saying is that the proposition is not to actually leave it to the network to try and manage things. The smarts aren't, from my point of view, with the utility, they're with the consumer. That's where they should be. Retail and hospitality, under enormous challenges. They need some help quite clearly. Tourism, I mean, we're talking to the guys in the Avon Valley. I'm actually gobsmacked. You know, when you go and actually talk to some of these tourism groups, how enabled the majority of their members are. And how can you actually exist and thrive and survive in a highly competitive sort of industry? In the sense that from our point of view, big data to us is much more than just probably what some of the definitions are at the moment. And the opportunities are around that transformation of big data into big knowledge. And happy any questions?
Thanks,
Thanks very much.
Jim, my name's Craig Hayes. I work with a satellite telecommunications company. Can you comment on the sovereign risk of the NBN knowing the election coming up in September
Normally it comes in at about number 3 question, but good, I'll get it out of the road as quickly as possible. This also normally has to be edited out of any of the films. Okay.
My questions around government and enthusiasm into local and state government. So particularly like you mentioned, the state of Maryland are really quite advanced in open data and access to services for the public. Not so much in Australia or WA. So as technology is kind of advanced, government hasn't been at the forefront of that. So now we're going to have a paradigm shift. I'm interested in how that's going to play out, and not so much just with the technology, although that's a big part. But you mentioned the transport issue, the traffic issue up the top. I mean, WA we've got Department of Transport, Main Road, City of Perth, ETA. They don't really talk to each other. So you're looking at a customer journey. You've got all these disparate units. So with a paradigm shift in technology, how does that all play out?
Well, there's 2 ways that my experience that it's worked. In other parts, and so I came back to Western Australia at the beginning of 2011. So this is my beginning of my third year in this role. Prior to that, I was running all the broadband and digital policy in Queensland, and prior to that in Tasmania. In those 2 states, what I did was I embarrassed the hell out of government. I worked with private sector. We did all of our projects and all of our pilots and all of our stuff in private sector, and we embarrassed the pants off the people running the public sector equivalent to the point where you drag them to the table because they had no other choice. I work very closely at, we'll do something and then we'll drag the politician to see how good it is, so the politician goes back and says, why aren't we doing that inside our environment? Okay, drive it down from the top. But through a point of, you can't argue, it can't be done. In 2002, we were in Tasmania, and we had started working on the proposition of building a pilot of 2,500 properties, fibre to the premises. And everybody we spoke to said, it's not commercially viable. Why on earth are you worrying about that? It's not commercially viable. It took us 4 years to deliver that. But we delivered it with some of the biggest names in technology, people like Intel, Cisco, people like Hitachi, and we also work very closely with a range of service providers in private sector to deliver services across that, and got to the point where a guy like David Bartlett, as the Premier of Tasmania, when he was there, fundamentally said, what are we arguing about? And that, when I have more time and I tell you the story, is what actually happened inside the expert panel over the NBN. They came to Tasmania and they said, people are telling us this is not viable, you're doing it, it's living and breathing, we'll go back and actually recommend this to the federal government. So Betfair came into Tasmania because the piece of property we had was actually connected to what we called TasColt, which was a collaborative optical leading test bed. We looked at technology like passive optic networks and recognised that that was the way forward. We looked at the constructs of actually and that's the sort of the premise I'm talking about with the points of interconnect. Stop having your head engines in the core and bring them closer to the edge. Because the closer you bring them to the edge, I saw what Isaak put up about 1 gigabit per second, but let me tell you, this is the sort of the earth-shattering point, the Twitter moment for this morning, is that only occurs between the property and the point of interconnect. After that, you suddenly go into contention. You start sharing pathways all the way back. So the further back in the core you put application engines, the more likely it is that you will not deliver those application engines across the bandwidth that you're talking about. Get application engines out there.
Thanks for the presentation.
Pleasure.
One of the things you've commented on early on is the reluctance of government to release data in this country as compared to, say, the US, which is much more, has different legislative situations. Is there any move at the moment?
Oh, massive move. Massive move, no question whatsoever. The one problem we have here in WA, we don't have, so from industry, you need to have a voice back into government in any way and however you can to say to the Western Australian government, you don't have a chief information officer. If you don't have a chief information officer, you don't have somebody in government who's actually spending their days thinking about these things. What you've got is 20 or 30 CIOs, all looking after their own little agendas within their own little agencies. What you need is somebody sitting above that who actually says, bugger all your little agendas. It's more important that we have a consistent position across government around open source data. It's important for us to have a consistent position across government around IP. So bugger your little agendas. What we're going to have from now on is we're going to turn the model on its head, and we're going to, the IP will vest with the person who develops the solution for government, and government will just take an exclusive right of use. So that you can use that to actually sell it to somebody else and sell it to somebody else and not be wrapped up and held. Those things will only come when you've got one voice. Somebody like Peter McGrath in Queensland, where he sits outside of any agency. He reports to the Premier, and all CIOs report to him. And their budgets are determined by what Peter thinks they should be spending, not what a separate head of an agency thinks they should be spending. It's brave, but yes.
Further to that question, thank you for your presentation on that. But in terms of open data policies, the ACT recently applied together a large number of APIs and that sort of thing. Is there any visibility within WA government of that type of initiative?
And the Premier will be my minister. He made that as the first statement at the beginning of his election campaign. I'm going to take on that portfolio which previously went to John Day. I'm expecting in the not too distant future to be able to sit down with his senior people at Premier and Cabinet and the iron ore sector. The only difference being is that the digital economy is going like that, and we all expect iron ore to tank to about $60 a tonne US in the not too distant future. So I know where I would want to be putting my investment and my faith in diversification and broadening of this economy. And it's not necessarily continually following a lane duck.
So just one further question. What lobby groups are the West Australian government listening to in sorts of
in digital?
Developing these policies?
Okay.
IT, digital policies. Who's got the voices now at the moment? There seems to be something to...
Well, I mean, there's different people talking. The peak body in Australia is the Information Industry Association. From my point of view, they're not the only people. I actually think that we're getting better traction, and some of our initiatives were around working with local government and working with regional development areas. We're getting better traction by actually getting the voice of the consumer, the voice of the person who wants the service, to actually permeate up into government. Rather than what we've had in the past, which is an industry association telling government this is what should be happening, this is what should be going on, when what would often happen in government is, that sounds very self-serving. Now, what voice is really missing, and it just, the door opened marginally. So there was an article about 2 weeks before the state election campaign in Perth now about we could be the next Silicon Valley, and it was to do with the guys that have come over and set up the chapter here. Yeah, Founders Institute, that's it. And I got a note from the Chief of Staff from the Premier who said, this startup and entrepreneurial stuff, maybe we should have a commerce policy about that. Now we put something together, but you didn't hear anything in the election campaign. And the fundamental reason is because one story does not make the resonance. Now, we've had OZATs, we've had Emergence, just had Startup Weekend, you've got Big Data Week. But none of these things are really finding their way into the psyche of government. And I'm not talking about me, public servants, I'm talking about politicians. And that's what we need to do. Now, we're pushing it from our end, they're my employers, so I've got to be careful how bolshy I get, in that respect. But we envisage an opportunity, and we're constantly pushing and constantly prodding around this notion of you must look at the diversity. Come, pitch the idea, get funded, develop it, deliver it, and disappear in 3 months. And be quite honestly, be happy to disappear. You know, this notion that, oh yes, all of you want to be sustainable businesses rolling along for the next 25 years, you know, that old model, well, you know, we could be stuck in our ways in how we're thinking about that with you. You may want to actually say, no, I just need you to help me to get booked up, out, exposed, done, delivered, packed up, and then we're off onto the next thing. And that's how we want to be, foot loose and fancy free. And we're sitting there going, oh, no, we need to help you to get yourself a head office, you know, to get some roots in, you know, because it's employment and investment and all those sorts of things that it's driving. And we need to be taught as much in that respect. Yeah.
Commercial bodies are generally the best people to commercialise and to technologies or provide services. So what's your view on, particularly in WA, some of the governments sort of stop dipping their toes into commercial activities rather than really providing data, open access and saying, okay, you go for it, data platform for commercial entities to package up services and applications and provide services. So I guess my fear is that with a new toy on the horizon, a lot of government departments think, oh, look what we can do with this rather than what they should be doing and kind of step back and provide that data openly.
Once again, and it's my thesis for today, the concept of data versus knowledge. And, you know, you have to get them to understand that what they're after is the knowledge for their primary purpose, and that they don't have to build big IT shops and big other forms of apparatus within their agencies to turn data into knowledge. That in actual fact, that's where the partnership is. But at the same time, we have to get, in government, have to get that spin around that it's all right, and it's almost an economic development proposition for us to spend money with you to develop a solution, and you make a buck out of it, and you actually get a business construct out of it. So that is a dialogue that we're trying to have into government around the notion of how government can actually use its spend and its need to drive economic development.
The knowledge that can be taken from understanding my data probably better. How do you speak to people who are very much insular there, I absolutely don't put any of my information out there? How do you convince them that the fear that they may have, and in some instances they come from persecuted backgrounds, things like that, people found out that Jews in Germany, they got slaughtered, so that's a fear that they have.
Let me share with you to answer that, and really, before I say that, there are two ways that I speak to them. If I speak to them, I'm diplomatic. If I'm speaking behind their back, I'm not diplomatic. If I'm trying to speak to others that might influence them, I'm even less diplomatic. But I have to a certain degree, respect the notion. And the story I'm very quickly going to share with you. In Tasmania, we came up with this great concept. I'm a father, but I'm a busy father. I do not get to see what my son, and certainly didn't get to see what my daughter did in school. My wife would ring me and say, your daughter's in the swimming carnival, she's just come second in a race. All I've got is a picture that my wife can construct for me. Technology says I could actually see the whole thing. Except for the fact that we have policies that say, because of a minority situation in our society, we have policies that say that we all have to give permission before any image is captured of a school student. So the whole concept of being able to live stream what goes on in a school so that parents can be connected with their kids as part of the education process is prevented because of those sorts of how things would look. They're not 5 years' time, so we're sort of there now. So that's why I was reviewing to see whether or not our predictions all came true. But I talked to a number of the Asian countries. I talked to Taiwan, I talked to South Korea, I talked to Japan, I talked to Singapore about the whole concept of a universal health record. And all of them said to me, get over yourself, Australia. You will never get 100% guarantee. We got over ourselves, we've got on with it, we've implemented it. Sure, we've had some problems, but 99.9% of the time it works, and we don't flagellate ourselves basically over the 0.01 when it happens. And they're doing it. What are we doing? We're still reaching for 100%. So it's the concept of sometimes you have to accept a little bit of risk if you want to take the stride forward. And that's the difficult That's the difficult concept that a number of my colleagues in government
very
have.
much a lower level of what can be delivered and what should be delivered and all these sorts of things. So I'd invite you to really think over the next few weeks how you're going to use this NBN and this huge pipe going into houses and businesses, because whole new apps are waiting, and not just apps but tiny businesses and everything else. It really does blow your mind once you start thinking about not just building a more bloated application but a more innovative application, and there's a big difference with those sorts of things. So Jim, thank you very much for enlightening us.
And look, please invite me back, and next time what I might do is actually bring a couple of friends who you know, whose minds are actually further over the horizon than mine.
Yeah, great. I know there are a few questions that weren't answered, so Jim and his team are just awesome at answering questions, and this space, they're always welcoming of questions.
And I guarantee you we'll be putting a big push into this whole notion of trying to open up the conservative sort of viewpoint that does exist within government. We know, I will assure you I know it only too well, and that it is on our agenda, top of our agenda, to smash it.
Workshops would be like this with people there in the same room at the same time.
So if I can just indulge, and I know I've got to be disappearing. Last year we initiated a program which is a first in Western Australia, and it is what we call the digital roundtables. And what we do is we get very senior bureaucrats and, if possible, senior advisors to government ministers, and if possible, a government minister. We put them in a room with people from industry, with people from academia, and with people from community. No agenda, one question, independent facilitator. We all bug out, we don't go in the room, and they have 2 to 3 hours of dialogue. And I'm happy to send you the first 2 reports of the first 2 meetings. We've got another 4 to come. I will progressively get more bolshy with the people I put in the room. Okay. But already we've got dialogue going across government. Next Monday I'm presenting to the Ministers' Council for Seniors, the Advisory Council for Seniors. They're asking about what can we do to remove the isolation of senior citizens. So that these questions are now coming to the fore. It takes a little bit of time, but we are actually peeling off the conservatism and really starting to open up to these sorts of things. And we will be exploring any opportunities we can to create these sorts of workshops where we can put people in the room in that regard.
Yeah, we've got an outstanding invitation to a local state member of Parliament as well. So we're going to try and get some of these guys in this room, but I've got to have your word that you're going to come back and impress them with your knowledge and want for this sort of stuff. So we'll invite them back. Apologies for going a bit over time. We did have an intention of doing a bit of networking, but the presentation was just brilliant. We really need to